fact, they will cheer you on. Somebody will challenge Citizens United, and you'll probably say, let me, and the head of a political party. If he is to be removed, the entire government likely would suffer, and the military or economic consequences to the nation could be severe. These repercussions, if they are to occur, should not result from the judgment of a single prosecutor, whether it be the Attorney General or Special Counsel, and a single jury. Dianne Feinstein's a wonderful lady and has passion on this issue about assault weapons. She was able to succeed politically. After 10 years, the gun assault weapons ban expired, and it's been hard to get it reestablished. She introduced legislation in 2013 that got 60 no votes, 16 Democrats. So I don't believe they see you as a threat to the nation if you come out on the idea that the Second Amendment has some meaning. In other words, the political process when it comes to guns is a work in progress, and I'd rather us decide that than you. When it comes to the pillar of virtue, Comey. Harry Reid, that he's been a supporter of Comey and led the fight to get him confirmed, as he believed Comey was a principled public servant. With the deepest regret, I now see that I was wrong. Mr. Nadler from New York. The president can fire him for cause and ought to. He violated all the guidelines and put his thumb on the scale of an election. Mr. Cohen from Tennessee, a Democrat, called on Comey to resign his position effective immediately. I'm sure upon reflection of this action, he will submit his letter of resignation for the nation's good. To my Democratic friends, you're all for getting rid of this guy. Now all of a sudden the country is turning upside down because Trump did. There's a process to find out what happened in the 2016 election. It's called Mr. Mueller. And I will do everything I can to make sure he finishes his job without political interference. And I'm here to tell anybody in the country who listens that this is so hypocritical of my friends on the other side. When it was their president, Kavanaugh was right. When you're talking about Roe v. Wade, it's okay to promise the nation it will never be overturned. It's okay to pick a Democratic staff member of this committee, but it's not okay to pick somebody who's been a lifelong Republican. People see through this. You had a chance and you lost. If you want to pick judges from your way of thinking, then you better win an election. I voted for two of your choices, Sotomayor and Kagan. Got a lot of crap. I would suggest you think long and hard if you got a political ambition of voting for this guy, because it will not play well on your side. And why did I do it? I thought they were qualified by any reasonable measure given the history of the Senate. But we have turned the history of the Senate upside down. I found that they were different than I would have picked Sotomayor and Kagan, but by any reasonable measure, they're qualified. You've been on the court for 12 years. You've had 307 decisions. You've been approved before. So I hope people in the country understand this game. It's a game that I am sad to be part of. It's gotten really bad. The antidote to our problems in this country when it comes to judges and politics is not to deny you a place on the Supreme Court. This is exactly where you need to be. This is exactly the time you need to be there. And I am telling President Trump, you do some things that drive me crazy. You do some great things. You have never done anything better, in my view, than to pick Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, because you had an opportunity to put well-qualified conservatives on the court, men steeped in the rule of law, who will apply analysis, not politics, to their decision-making, and you knocked it out of the park. And to my friends on the other side, you can't lose the election and pick judges. If you want to pick judges, you better win.
Let me tell everybody what the rest of the day holds for us. Judge Kavanaugh, you can take a break now that we had originally scheduled for 15 minutes, and it may take 15 minutes, but we got to put a different table in here for the people that are going to introduce you. So if your staff will watch and we get done in less than 15 minutes, I'd like to start just as soon as the table is set. So we'll take a 15-minute break now, and then we have the introducers, and then we will give the oath to the nominee, and then we will hear the statement from the nominee. And then
as we welcome our viewers back to our live coverage, headquartered here in New York, a bit of housekeeping. Number one, after we just take some notes on what we just witnessed, we'll be joining Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace from another floor in this building. But first, we are joined by Neil Katyal, former acting Solicitor General of the United States, a gentleman who has argued 37 cases in front of this Supreme Court, and Ellie Honig, former attorney with the Southern District of New York, along with Points West. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Neil, what have we witnessed now?
Well, I think we're witnessing what was predicted in a way, which is that this hearing has been much more about the nominator, Donald Trump, than about the nominee, Brett Kavanaugh. And we haven't even heard from Kavanaugh yet. We've had a lot of skirmishing and fighting. There's interrupted in the morning in a really kind of awful way. Yeah. I think, the cloud over this is twofold. Number one, there's this whole document question. 42 documents dumped on them the night before. Nobody's had time to review it, and so on. 100,000 pages.
And that's real.
That sounds very real. I mean, the idea that you have that dumped the night before, I heard Senator Tillis say, well, there's new modern software that allows you to go through stuff quickly, but I'm not aware of any software that allows people to go through 42,000 documents in 6 or 7 hours. So, there's something serious here, along with 100,000 pages of documents that have been withheld by executive privilege. So that's one problem. Then the other real problem is the problem of the nominator in his own situation. Donald Trump has been fingered by his own personal lawyer as part of a criminal investigation. That very well may go to the Supreme Court. Kavanaugh was picked on a certain list. We heard Ted Cruz today, who's a very thoughtful guy on some constitutional issues, but he said, well, this is a president that has a referendum in 2016 because he put a list out and said, here are my Supreme Court nominees, and so everyone should defer to Kavanaugh. There's only one problem with that. Kavanaugh wasn't on that list in 2016. He was only added in November of 2017, so whatever referendum Senator Cruz has, I think, is non-existent.
And further, if you listen to the Kamala Harris argument, he was not on the list, but was placed on the list when the president entered a period of genuine jeopardy. Find me a guy who has written about presidents in jeopardy, or so her argument goes.
That's exactly right. And, and I have to say, Brett Kavanaugh, I've argued in front of him. I know him. He's a lovely guy. And I almost feel bad for him that he's got the misfortune of being nominated by this president. It overshadows his own accomplishments.
Ellie, a friend of mine, loyal Republican, says of this nominee, as close as the Republican Party has come to a guy who was raised in a terrarium to be a Republican-appointed justice of the Supreme Court.
And what's so interesting about him is I think the make-or-break issue is what we were just talking about. What is this judge's view, potentially justice's view, on the extent of the executive power? And what's really so unusual here is we have a judge who has written and spoken and acted extensively. This is a judge, when he worked for Ken Starr, who served maybe the most famous subpoena in our nation's history on Bill Clinton. Yeah. And I would want to see tomorrow, do you still believe that a president should have to answer a subpoena like the one you served on Bill Clinton 20 years ago? This is a nominee who has written extensively in the infamous Minnesota Law Review article that a sitting president should not be indicted, should not be subject to a civil suit, which of course conflicts with the Paula Jones versus Bill Clinton case. That I would want to hear his views on that. Do you believe what you believe then? Have you changed? And if so, why? And I think we saw a really robust warm-up today to what promises to be an interesting fight tomorrow that's equal to the stakes.
Question for both of you, starting with you, Ellie, and that is, for the viewers who depend on us to separate fact from hyperbole, do you think the Democrats, have a valid argument that it's unfair that any judge in the country would delay a case based on a 40,000-page document dump last night, and B, for the critical point in his life where he was staff secretary in the White House, writing about any number of issues, dealing with any number of issues, that's a black hole in the known casework here, that for those two reasons, this should be delayed. Is there validity?
I think it's absolutely a valid point. I think Senator Booker said it well. He said, 5 days. What's the harm if we put this off for 5 days? If this judge becomes a justice, he's going to be on the bench 20, 30 years from now, 4 or 5 presidents down the line. What's the harm? And I think it's become a rhetorical point, but it's a fair point. As a litigator, if you dared to dump 1/10 of that number of documents on the opposing party the eve of trial, you would be reprimanded by the judge, and everything would be pushed off unquestionably.
Neil, same question.
Brian, it's an ironclad argument. And, the authority for this is no less than Senator Grassley himself and Senator Cornyn, who are the two people pushing back at the hearing today. Both of them in 2010, I have the quotes on my Twitter feed, said, you can't let this Kagan nomination go forward until we have all the documents. It's unfair to the committee. It's unfair to the American people. And, here, I really do think it's actually unfair to Judge Kavanaugh to have this proceeding go on. These documents are going to come out at some point. If he's confirmed and then the documents come out and there's some discrepancies or something, that's just bad for the court.
I have to say I felt well represented today. You've been terrific co-counsel to have here watching with us, and appreciate that. To our viewers, a reminder, when Judge Kavanaugh is ready to give his opening statement, and remember, there's, as you heard Senator Grassley say, there's a table change, and then there are nominators, there are introducers from his life. But when the Kavanaugh statement comes, it being part of the focal point of the day, we will cover it live and in its entirety. However, now it is time for Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace.
A surreal day in politics. Donald Trump slammed in a devastating new account of his presidency from legendary reporter Bob Woodward. Excerpts from Woodward's new book breaking in the Washington Post at the very same time that Judge Brett Kavanaugh faced fierce opposition from Democrats over those tens of thousands of documents withheld by the Trump administration.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with my colleague, Senator Harris. Mr. Chairman, we received 42,000 documents that we haven't been able to review last night, and we believe this hearing should be postponed.
This is an exciting day for all of you here, and you're rightly proud.
Mr. Chairman, if we cannot be recognized, I move to adjourn.
The American people.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Directly from Judge Kavanaugh later this afternoon.
As the fireworks went off on Capitol Hill, Woodward's explosive account of the Trump presidency sent shockwaves throughout official Washington. The book includes indictments of Donald Trump's conduct in office that have never before been compiled in one place and attributed to so many close advisors to the president. It's the most explicit accounting of the way that the president's own cabinet and senior staff work to protect the country from Donald Trump's worst instincts. We'll cover all of the details this hour, but we'll start with Woodward's account from the president's former attorney in the Russia investigation, John Dowd. Woodward recounts Dowd's concerns about Donald Trump's risk of committing perjury if he were to testify before Robert Mueller. Quote, John Dowd was convinced that President Trump would commit perjury if he talked to special counsel Robert S. Mueller. So on January 27th, the president's then personal attorney staged a practice session to try to make his point. In the White House residence, Dowd peppered Trump with questions about the Russia investigation, provoking stumbles, contradictions, and lies until the president eventually lost his cool. This thing's a goddamn hoax, Trump erupted at the start of a 30-minute rant that finished with him saying, quote, I don't really want to testify. The Woodward excerpts made their way into public view as the president appears to be at peak rage against his own Justice Department and his own FBI. A source close to the president who spoke to him this weekend telling me the president is, quote, in the worst mood of his presidency and is calling friends and allies to vent about his selection of Sessions as Attorney General and Chris Wray as FBI Director around the clock. Welcome to September, everyone. Here to help us through the day's developments, some of our favorite reporters and friends from the Washington Post, White House Bureau Chief Phil Rucker, from the New York Times, Mike Schmidt, former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance is back, and at the table, John Heilman, NBC News and MSNBC National Affairs Analyst, and former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards. Phil Rucker, let's start with you. You have the byline on the news story about Bob Woodward's book. First, did you read the whole book and take us through what seems like pretty explosive new reporting about John Dowd's concerns about Donald Trump?
Yeah, so Nicole, to answer your first question, yes, I've read it in its entirety, and it's a pretty complete, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you called it a devastating portrait of the presidency and his power and how he makes decisions, to focus in on the John Dowd examples. There's that practice session